They laughed when the blind girl spoke of destiny, until the wind carried her prophecy across the west. The dust rolled through the frontier town of Silver Creek like a restless tide, whispering against wooden storefronts and rattling the glass panes beneath the relentless afternoon sun. Horses shifted beside the hitching posts, their leather saddles creaking softly, while the scent of dry earth and coal smoke drifted through the air. And there she stood, small and still at the edge of the boardwalk, her pale eyes unfocused yet serene, as though she listened to a world no one else could hear. Ayanna Redbird was blind, Apache by blood, and alone among those who saw her as little more than a curiosity. Her worn buckskin dress brushed the dusty planks as she tilted her face toward the warmth of the sun, fingers gently tracing the smooth curve of a turquoise pendant resting against her chest. It was said the stone had belonged to her grandmother, a healer who once listened to the wind as if it were scripture. The townsfolk, however, heard only silence when they looked at her. A group of men lingered outside the saloon, their boots scuffing against the boards, their laughter cutting through the dry air like a careless breeze. "Careful now," one of them muttered with a crooked grin. The blind girls staring again. Another tipped his hat low, chuckling. "Tell us our fortunes, sweetheart. What do you see in the dark?" Ayanna did not flinch. She merely turned her head slightly, as if sensing something beyond their mockery, her lips parting with a quiet calm that unsettled even the boldest among them. "I see a storm," she said softly, her voice steady as a still river. "Not of rain, but of choices, and it will change everything." The men laughed harder, the sound echoing down the empty street, yet somewhere in the distance, a lone rider slowed his horse. Ethan Caldwell had arrived in Silver Creek just past noon, the journey stretching over 50 hard miles of open desert. His coat was dust-streaked, his boots worn from the trail, and his steady gray eyes carried the quiet weight of a man who had seen too much injustice to ignore it. As he dismounted beside the general store, he caught the last echo of her words drifting through the warm air, and something in their quiet certainty drew him closer. He watched as the townsfolk dispersed with dismissive smirks, leaving the girl standing alone in the shimmering heat. She lifted her chin slightly as Ethan approached, her expression composed, as though she had sensed his presence long before he spoke. "They mock what they do not understand," he said gently, his voice low and respectful. A faint smile touched her lips. "Mockery is the language of fear, Mr. Caldwell." He stiffened. "You know my name?" The breeze stirred her dark hair, carrying the faint scent of sage and sun-warmed earth. "The wind speaks," she replied. "And today, it carries your footsteps." Ethan glanced around, unsettled yet strangely compelled, as if the world had shifted by a single inch. The town seemed quieter now, the sunlight sharper, the horizon stretching endlessly beyond the red hills. "Tell me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What else does it carry?" Ayanna's fingers curled gently around the turquoise pendant, its surface glinting like a fragment of sky. "By the next full moon," she murmured, "men will stand at the edge of war, and the fate of the West will rest on a choice made in silence." The wind sighed through Silver Creek, rustling signs and stirring the dust at their feet, and for the first time that day, no one laughed. The wind lingered long after her words had faded, stirring the dust along the quiet street of Silver Creek as though the earth itself had paused to listen. Ethan Caldwell remained still beside her, his gloved hand resting lightly on the brim of his hat, studying the young woman whose sightless eyes seemed fixed on a horizon far beyond his own. The afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the boardwalk, warming the weathered planks beneath their feet, while the distant jingle of spurs and the soft creak of leather drifted through the air. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan cleared his throat, his voice low and respectful. "You speak with certainty for someone who cannot see." Ayanna Redbird tilted her head slightly, the faintest hint of a smile touching her lips. "I do not see with my eyes, Mr. Caldwell," she replied gently. "I listen. The wind carries stories. The earth remembers footsteps, and the silence between heartbeats tells the truth." Her fingers brushed the turquoise pendant resting against her chest, its surface catching the sunlight like a fragment of clear desert sky. Ethan followed the movement, sensing its importance. "That stone," he asked quietly, "does it guide you?" She nodded once. It belonged to my grandmother. She was a healer. She taught me that the world speaks to those who are willing to hear it. When I lost my sight, I did not lose my way. I simply learned to walk a different path. A warm breeze drifted through the street, carrying the scent of sage and sun-baked timber. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle echoed faintly across the plains, its lonely cry stretching over miles of open land. Ethan shifted his weight, unsettled by the calm certainty in her voice. "You spoke of a storm," he said. "Not of rain, but of choices. What did you mean?" Ayana's expression grew still, her unfocused eyes turning toward the horizon as though she could sense the distant hills rising beyond the town. "Within 3 nights," she murmured softly, "riders will arrive from the east. They will bring words that tremble with fear and pride. And unless wisdom finds its voice, those words will harden into silence that cannot be undone." Ethan felt a chill despite the warmth of the sun. "You speak as though the future is already written." "No," she answered gently. "The future is a trail. It can be chosen or abandoned. But once taken, it leaves footprints that time cannot erase." The rhythmic sound of hooves echoed along the far end of the street as a wagon rolled slowly past, its wooden wheels groaning against the dry earth. Ayana turned her head slightly toward the sound. "You came from the south," she said calmly. 50 miles of open desert. Your horse is weary, but loyal, and your heart carries questions heavier than your saddlebags." Ethan's breath caught. "How could you possibly know that?" A faint breeze lifted a strand of her dark hair, brushing it gently across her cheek. "Because the wind told me," she replied. "And because you paused when you heard my voice. Only a man searching for truth would stop for a stranger." The words settled between them like dust drifting in the sunlight. Ethan removed his hat, running a hand through his sun-bleached hair as he considered her carefully. The laughter of the townsfolk had faded, replaced by a growing stillness that seemed to press gently against the edges of the afternoon. "If what you say is true," he said quietly, "then why remain here, where they mock you?" Ayana's smile was soft, tinged with quiet resolve. "Because Silver Creek stands at a crossroads. And sometimes, destiny chooses the place before it chooses the people." She lifted her chin slightly, her expression serene. "The West is changing, Mr. Caldwell. And when the moment arrives, someone must be brave enough to listen." Ethan gazed at her in silence, the distant hills glowing amber beneath the descending sun. For the first time since riding into Silver Creek, he felt the unmistakable pull of something greater than chance. And as the wind whispered once more through the quiet street, he realized that her prophecy had already begun. The sun drifted lower over Silver Creek, spilling amber light across the dusty street as the town settled into the slow rhythm of evening, and the hush that followed Ayana Redbird's words lingered like a promise carried on the desert wind. Ethan Caldwell remained beside her, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sky stretched wide and endless, painted in shades of gold and copper, as though the land itself were holding its breath. A church bell rang softly in the distance, its lonely toll echoing across the wooden buildings and hitching posts, mingling with the faint murmur of voices from the saloon and the gentle snort of horses resting after a long day beneath the sun. Ayana stood unmoving, her posture calm and steady, her fingers resting lightly on the turquoise pendant that gleamed against her buckskin dress, the stone warm with the memory of generations. "The air is changing," she said quietly, her voice barely louder than the whisper of wind brushing against the boardwalk. Ethan followed her gaze, though her I saw nothing in the ordinary sense. "I feel nothing but the coming night," he replied. She smiled softly. "Night always arrives, Mr. Caldwell, but tonight carries more than darkness. It carries footsteps that have not yet touched the earth." The words stirred something deep within him, a sense of anticipation he could neither explain nor dismiss. He studied her in the fading light, noting the peaceful confidence that rested upon her face like a quiet dawn. "You speak as though time bends to your voice," he said gently. "Not to my voice," she answered, "but to the truth that flows through all things. The river knows where it will meet the sea long before it leaves the mountains. I only listen." A warm breeze swept through the street, rustling the edges of canvas awnings and carrying the scent of sage and wood smoke from a nearby hearth. The sound of a fiddle drifted faintly from the saloon, soft and wistful, like a memory searching for its way home. Ayana tilted her head toward the melody, her expression thoughtful. "This town stands at a crossroads," she murmured. "Every laugh, every choice, every whispered fear has led to this moment. Some will choose pride, others will choose peace, and one will decide the fate of them all." Ethan felt the weight of her words settle upon him like the desert dusk. "And who is that one?" he asked quietly. Ayana turned her face toward him, her sightless eyes reflecting the glow of the setting sun. "The man who listens when others refuse," she said. "The man who sees not with his eyes, but with his heart." The gentle certainty in her voice caused him to fall silent. He glanced toward the distant hills, their silhouettes darkening against the horizon, and for the first time since his arrival, he sensed that his journey had never truly been his own. "You believe that man is me," he said at last. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she lifted her hand, letting the evening breeze brush against her fingertips as though greeting an old friend. "I do not believe," she replied softly. "I know." The fading light painted Silver Creek in shades of violet and gold, and lanterns began to glow one by one along the street, casting gentle halos against the deepening twilight. Somewhere beyond the town, far across the open desert, the distant echo of hooves drifted upon the wind, too faint for most to hear. But Ayana heard it. Her expression grew still, her lips parting slightly as she listened. "They are coming," she whispered. 3 nights, as the wind foretold. Riders from the east, carrying words that will shape the destiny of the west. Ethan's heart stirred with a quiet resolve, and he placed his hat firmly upon his head, his voice steady beneath the gathering stars. "Then I will be here to meet them." Ayana inclined her head gently, her serene smile illuminated by the soft glow of the lantern light. "And when they arrive," she said, "remember this, Mr. Caldwell. The future does not belong to the strongest hand, but to the bravest soul." As the first stars shimmered above Silver Creek and the wind whispered across the endless plains, the prophecy moved silently toward its beginning. Morning arrived gently over Silver Creek, spilling pale gold across the rooftops as the desert awakened beneath a sky brushed with rose and amber. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint scent of sage and sun-warmed earth, while a soft breeze stirred the dust along the quiet street. Lanterns were extinguished one by one, replaced by the glow of dawn that painted long shadows across the wooden boardwalk. Ayana Redbird stood near the edge of town, her face lifted toward the rising sun, as though she could feel its light resting upon her skin. Though her eyes could not see the horizon, she sensed its vastness, the endless stretch of land whispering secrets through the wind. Beside her, Ethan Caldwell leaned against the hitching rail, his hat pulled low as he watched the town stir to life. Wagons creaked into motion, shop doors opened with soft groans, and the distant whistle of a train echoed faintly across the plains, a lonely note carried for miles. "You rose before the sun," Ethan said quietly, breaking the morning stillness. Ayana smiled gently. "The dawn speaks softly," she replied. "Only those who wake early can hear its truth." Her fingers brushed the turquoise pendant resting against her chest, its surface warm from the touch of her hand. "Today feels different," she continued. "The earth is holding its breath." Ethan followed her gaze toward the eastern horizon, where the light stretched across the desert like a promise. "You still believe they are coming?" he asked. "Not believe," she answered calmly. "I know." The steady certainty in her voice lingered in the air, as unshakable as the mountains beyond the valley. For a moment, silence settled between them, filled only by the distant clatter of hooves and the rustle of canvas awnings. Then, from across the street, a familiar murmur rose. A group of townsfolk gathered near the general store, their eyes drifting toward the blind girl standing in the morning light. Their whispers carried on the breeze, low but unmistakable. "There she is again," one man muttered. "The Apache girl with her stories." Another scoffed, folding his arms, talking to the wind like it is some kind of oracle. A woman shook her head with a faint sigh. "Superstition and shadows. That is all she offers." The laughter that followed was quieter than before, yet edged with doubt, as though uncertainty had begun to temper their scorn. Ethan straightened, his expression firm, but Ayana merely inclined her head, untroubled by their words. "Do they anger you?" he asked. She shook her head gently. "No. Mockery is born of fear, and fear is born of misunderstanding. In time, even the hardest hearts learn to listen. The breeze swept softly through her dark hair, carrying with it a distant sound that made her still. Her serene expression shifted, her fingers tightening slightly around the pendant. "They are closer now," she whispered. Ethan narrowed his eyes, straining to hear. At first, there was nothing but the quiet murmur of the waking town. Then, faintly, from far beyond the eastern ridge, came the rhythmic echo of hooves upon open ground. The sound was distant, yet unmistakable, drifting towards Silver Creek like a heartbeat carried across the desert. Ethan's breath slowed as realization settled within him. "You were right," he said softly. Ayanna nodded, her voice calm as the dawn. "The wind never lies." The townsfolk fell, silent as they, too, sensed the approaching riders. Eyes turned toward the horizon, where a thin cloud of dust began to rise against the pale morning sky. The laughter faded, replaced by a hush that spread through Silver Creek like the first shadow of an approaching storm. Ethan adjusted his hat and stepped forward, his voice steady with quiet resolve. "Whatever comes, you will not face it alone." Ayanna's gentle smile returned, illuminated by the golden light of the rising sun. "No one ever does," she said. As the distant hoofbeats drew nearer and the wind whispered through the awakening town, the prophecy moved one step closer to its unfolding, carried on the breath of dawn across the vast and waiting west. The dust on the eastern horizon rose higher with each passing minute, a pale ribbon unfurling beneath the morning sun as Silver Creek watched in breathless silence. The rhythmic echo of approaching hooves rolled across the desert, steady and unhurried, carrying with it a sense of inevitability that settled deep within the bones of those who listened. Shopkeepers paused in their doorways, hands resting against weathered wood, while ranchers shaded their eyes beneath worn hats. Even the wind seemed to soften, as though the land itself wished to hear what destiny had to say. Ayanna Redbird stood unmoving at the edge of the boardwalk, her face turned toward the rising dust, her fingers gently clasping the turquoise pendant at her throat. Its cool surface warmed beneath her touch, pulsing faintly like a quiet heartbeat. Beside her, Ethan Caldwell narrowed his eyes toward the distant ridge, the sunlight glinting against his belt buckle as he studied the approaching figures. "There are 3 of them," he said softly. "Riders from the east, just as you foretold." Ayanna inclined her head, her expression serene. "They carry more than dust and leather," she replied. "They carry words heavy with consequence." The hoofbeats grew clearer, echoing against the wooden storefronts as the riders crested the low rise beyond the town. 3 silhouettes emerged against the wide blue sky, their outlines sharpened by the morning light. They rode with calm purpose, their horses well-kept and sure-footed, moving neither in haste nor in fear. As they drew nearer, the townsfolk gathered in cautious silence, their earlier laughter replaced by uneasy curiosity. The riders slowed at the entrance to Silver Creek, their presence commanding attention without a single word. The first was an older man clad in a dark traveling coat, his silver hair stirring gently in the breeze. At his side rode a younger companion carrying a leather satchel stamped with an official seal, and behind them rode a native messenger, his posture dignified, his gaze steady as the desert horizon. The 3 halted before the boardwalk, and the dust settled slowly around them like the closing of a curtain. The elder dismounted with measured grace, his boots touching the ground with quiet authority. Removing his hat, he surveyed the town before speaking in a voice both calm and resonant. "I am Governor Henry Whitmore of the Arizona Territory," he announced. "I come bearing a message that concerns the future of this land." A ripple of murmurs spread through the gathered crowd. Ethan stepped forward, his stance respectful yet firm. "Silver Creek welcomes you, Governor," he said. "What brings you so far from the capital?" Whitmore's gaze shifted briefly toward Ayanna, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "A matter of peace," he replied. "Representatives from nearby Apache lands have requested a council. They seek an accord that will shape the destiny of this territory. I require a neutral ground, and Silver Creek stands at the crossroads of their journey." A hush fell over the townspeople, uncertainty lingering in the air like dust suspended in sunlight. The governor's words carried the weight of history, and with them came the quiet realization that the future had arrived at their doorstep. Ayana stepped forward, guided by the whisper of the wind. You were delayed by 2 hours at the Red Mesa crossing, she said gently. Your carriage wheel fractured, and you feared you would not reach this town before nightfall. Whitmore's expression stilled in astonishment. That is correct, he said slowly. But no one here could have known such a thing. A faint smile touched Ayana's lips. The wind remembers every step taken upon the earth, she replied, and it has carried your journey to me. The governor studied her with quiet awe, his voice softening. Who are you, child? Ethan answered before she could speak. Her name is Ayana Redbird. Whitmore inclined his head respectfully. Then it seems, Miss Redbird, that fate has guided me to the one voice this council may need most. The morning sun climbed higher, illuminating Silver Creek in a wash of golden light as understanding dawned upon the silent crowd. The laughter of yesterday had vanished, replaced by wonder, and as the wind whispered gently across the open plains, the prophecy moved forward, no longer a distant promise, but a living truth unfolding before them all. The morning sun climbed higher above Silver Creek, bathing the town in a warm, steady glow as the dust from the governor's arrival slowly settled into the earth. The air felt different now, charged with quiet anticipation, as though the desert itself recognized that history had paused at the edge of its breath. Governor Henry Whitmore stood before the gathered townsfolk, his dignified presence commanding attention, while the leather satchel at his aide's side rested like a sealed promise waiting to be opened. Beside him, the Apache messenger remained poised and silent, his calm gaze sweeping across the crowd with quiet dignity. Ayana Redbird inclined her head slightly, her sightless eyes turned toward the sound of the governor's steady breathing, as though she could sense the weight of responsibility resting upon his shoulders. Ethan Caldwell stood close by her side, his posture resolute, his expression thoughtful beneath the brim of his hat. The murmur of the townspeople softened into respectful silence as Whitmore spoke once more. Silver Creek has been chosen as neutral ground, he said, his voice measured and clear. In 2 days' time, delegates from the Arizona Territory and leaders of the Apache Nation will meet here to negotiate a treaty that may shape the future of the frontier. If peace is to prevail, it must begin with trust. A hush spread through the crowd like a ripple across still water. The words carried the promise of unity, yet uncertainty lingered in the eyes of many who had known only suspicion and hardship. Ayana's fingers gently brushed the turquoise pendant resting against her chest, its smooth surface warm beneath her touch. The wind spoke of this, she said softly, a meeting of voices where silence once stood. But peace, like the desert bloom, requires courage to flourish. Whitmore regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. You speak wisely, Miss Redbird. Such courage will be needed from all who gather here. He paused before continuing. I ask that you attend the council as an observer. Sometimes, insight arrives from unexpected places. A faint stir passed through the townspeople, surprise replacing doubt as they listened. Ethan glanced toward Ayana, his voice low. It seems destiny has called upon you. She smiled gently. Destiny calls upon us all, Mr. Caldwell. It is whether we answer that defines who we become. The governor's aide opened the satchel and withdrew a rolled parchment sealed with wax. Whitmore accepted it with care and presented it to the crowd. This document bears the authority of the territory, he declared. It invites peace, cooperation, and a future built upon understanding rather than fear. As he spoke, the morning breeze swept through Silver Creek, rustling the edges of the parchment and stirring the dust at their feet. The Apache messenger stepped forward, placing a hand over his heart in solemn acknowledgement. Though he spoke no words, his gesture carried a profound sense of respect. Ayana turned her face toward him, sensing the sincerity in his presence. The earth recognizes your steps, she said quietly. You carry the hopes of your people with honor. The messenger inclined his head in silent gratitude. The townsfolk watched in awe, their earlier skepticism fading like mist beneath the rising sun. Ayana's voice drifted once more through the stillness. Yet the wind warns of shadows that follow even the brightest dawn. Peace will be tested, not by swords, but by doubt. Only those who trust will guide it safely into the light. Ethan felt a quiet resolve settle within him, steady and unyielding. Then we will stand together, he said, for peace and for what is right. Governor Whitmore nodded, his expression solemn yet hopeful. May this town prove worthy of its place in history. As the church bell tolled in the distance, its clear notes echoing across the open plains, Silver Creek seemed transformed. The whispers of doubt gave way to cautious optimism, and the laughter that once mocked the blind girl faded into respectful silence. Bathed in the golden light of morning, Iona stood at the crossroads of destiny, listening to the wind as it carried the promise of a future not yet written, and in that quiet moment, the West itself seemed to lean closer, waiting for the prophecy to unfold. The sun reached its zenith above Silver Creek, casting a brilliant light across the town as preparations for the council began to unfold with quiet urgency. The steady rhythm of hammers echoed against timber as townsfolk erected a long wooden table in the open square, its polished surface gleaming beneath the cloudless sky. Canvas awnings were stretched to offer shade, and barrels of fresh water were rolled into place, their iron bands clinking softly in the dry desert air. Horses shifted restlessly at their posts, their tails flicking lazily against the heat, while the scent of dust and sun-warmed leather drifted through the streets. Iona Redbird stood near the edge of the gathering, her presence calm and unassuming, her fingers resting lightly upon the turquoise pendant at her throat. Though she could not see the scene before her, she sensed the movement around her with quiet clarity, hearing each footstep, each whispered voice, each breath carried on the wind. Beside her, Ethan Caldwell watched the preparations with thoughtful eyes, his expression steady as he surveyed the town. "They are working together," he said softly. "Men who would not have shared a table yesterday now build one side by side." Iona inclined her head gently. "The wind is changing," she replied. "When hearts begin to listen, even the smallest acts can shape the course of history." Across the square, Governor Henry Whitmore conferred with his aide and the Apache messenger, their voices low and deliberate. The parchment bearing the seal of the Arizona Territory lay unrolled upon the table, its edges held in place by smooth stones. Whitmore's face was composed, yet a quiet tension lingered in his eyes, the burden of responsibility etched into every measured movement. As the midday breeze stirred, the distant call of a hawk echoed across the sky, its cry sharp and clear. Iona's expression grew still, her head turning slightly as she listened. "There is unrest in the air," she murmured. Ethan glanced toward her, concern flickering in his gaze. "You sense something more?" She nodded slowly. "Peace stands at the threshold, but doubt walks close behind it. Not all who gather believe in harmony. Some fear what they do not understand, and fear can cloud even the clearest judgment." At the far end of the square, a group of townsmen lingered near the saloon, their hushed voices carrying on the breeze. Their expressions were guarded, their glances wary as they watched the unfolding preparations. One man folded his arms, shaking his head slightly, while another cast a doubtful look toward the Apache messenger. Though no harsh words were spoken, the weight of suspicion lingered like a shadow beneath the brilliant sun. Ethan followed their gaze, his voice firm yet calm. "Not everyone trusts what is coming." Iona's serene smile returned, gentle and unwavering. "Trust is not given in a moment," she said. "It is earned through courage and patience. Like the desert after rain, it blooms when given time." The wind whispered softly across the square, lifting a strand of her dark hair as the turquoise pendant glimmered against her chest. The Apache messenger approached her then, his footsteps measured and respectful. Placing his hand over his heart, he bowed his head slightly in silent greeting. Iona mirrored the gesture, her voice soft but certain. "You carry hope with you," she said, "and the strength of generations." The messenger inclined his head in gratitude, his expression solemn yet warm. Governor Whitmore observed the exchange, his gaze thoughtful. "Miss Redbird," he said, stepping forward, "your presence brings a sense of calm to this gathering. I trust you will remain by our side during the council." Iona bowed her head gently. "I will listen," she replied, "and when the moment calls for truth, I will speak." As the afternoon light shimmered across Silver Creek, the town seemed suspended between past and future, poised upon the edge of destiny. The long table stood ready beneath the open sky, a symbol of unity where division had once taken root. Ethan Caldwell stood beside Iona, his resolve unwavering as he gazed toward the distant hills. And as the desert wind carried whispers across the sunlit plains, it bore with it both promise and uncertainty, reminding all who listened that the greatest battles were not fought with weapons, but with faith, understanding, and the courage to choose peace. As the afternoon sun drifted westward, Silver Creek shimmered beneath a veil of golden light, the air warm and still as though the desert itself were listening for the next breath of history. The long wooden table stood ready in the center of the square, its polished surface reflecting the sky like a silent promise, while canvas awnings cast gentle shadows that swayed with the whisper of the wind. Townsfolk gathered in quiet anticipation, their earlier doubts softened into cautious hope, and the low murmur of voices blended with the creak of saddle leather and the distant cry of a hawk circling high above the endless plains. Ayanna Redbird stood beside Ethan Caldwell at the edge of the assembly, her sightless eyes lifted toward the warmth of the sun, her fingers resting lightly upon the turquoise pendant that lay against her heart. She listened to the subtle rhythm of footsteps approaching from the western trail, the soft rustle of fabric, and the quiet exhale of horses slowing after miles of steady travel. "They are near," she whispered, her voice gentle yet certain. Ethan followed her words, narrowing his gaze toward the horizon as a second cloud of dust rose against the amber light. Within moments, figures emerged from the shimmering heat, riding with dignified calm. At their head was an Apache elder, his silver-streaked hair bound with leather ties, his presence serene and commanding. Beside him rode a young woman bearing a woven sash of deep crimson and turquoise, its intricate patterns catching the sun like threads of living history. The riders approached without haste, their horses moving with quiet grace as they entered Silver Creek and halted before the waiting council. The town fell silent, the weight of the moment settling upon every heart. Governor Henry Whitmore stepped forward with measured respect, removing his hat as he greeted them. "On behalf of the Arizona Territory, I welcome you," he said, his voice clear and steady. The Apache elder inclined his head. "I am Chief Nantan Luda," he replied, his tone calm and resonant. "We come in peace, seeking a future where our children may walk the same earth without fear." Ayanna felt the sincerity in his words ripple through the stillness like water across sand. She stepped forward, guided by the whisper of the wind, and bowed her head in quiet reverence. "The earth recognizes your steps, Chief Nantan Luda," she said softly. "It has carried your journey upon its breath." The elder regarded her with thoughtful curiosity. "And you, child, listen as the old ones once did," he said gently. "Your spirit walks paths unseen." A faint smile touched Ayanna's lips. "The wind is my teacher," she replied. As the delegates gathered around the long table, the late afternoon light softened into hues of amber and rose, bathing Silver Creek in a tranquil glow. Yet beneath the calm, a subtle tension lingered, as fragile as glass beneath a careful hand. Ayanna's expression grew still, her fingers tightening slightly around the pendant as she sensed the quiet unease stirring among the townsfolk. "Not all hearts are at peace," she murmured. Ethan leaned closer, his voice low. "What do you hear?" She lifted her face toward the breeze. "Doubt," she answered, "like a shadow at the edge of dawn. It seeks to silence trust before it can take root." At that moment, a gust of wind swept through the square, lifting dust into a swirling dance that shimmered in the fading sunlight. The turquoise pendant warmed against her skin, and a vision stirred within her like an echo carried across time. "Listen," she said softly, her voice steady as the desert horizon. "The future stands before you like an open trail. Choose pride, and it will vanish into dust. Choose understanding, and it will lead to a sunrise shared by all." Her words fell gently into the silence, and even the wind seemed to pause in reverence. Chief Nantan Luda inclined his head with solemn respect, while Governor Whitmore regarded her with quiet awe. Ethan felt a steady resolve rise within him, as clear and enduring as the mountains beyond the valley. The last rays of sunlight stretched across Silver Creek, casting long shadows that blended into the gathering dusk. And as the desert wind whispered through the town, carrying hope upon its breath, destiny stood poised at the crossroads, waiting for the courage of those who dared to listen. The desert dusk settled gently over Silver Creek, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet as the council gathered around the long wooden table beneath the open heavens. Lanterns flickered to life one by one, their golden glow swaying softly in the evening breeze, casting halos of light across weathered faces filled with anticipation and doubt. The air carried the scent of sage and cooling earth, while the distant cry of a lone coyote drifted across the plains, a solemn reminder of the untamed land that surrounded them. Governor Henry Whitmore stood at the head of the table, the parchment of the proposed treaty unrolled before him, its wax seal gleaming beneath the lantern light. Across from him sat Chief Nantan Luda, dignified and composed, his presence steady as the ancient mountains. Ethan Caldwell remained near Ayanna Redbird, his silent watchfulness offering her both reassurance and strength as the voices of the council began to rise and fall in careful deliberation. "This treaty," Whitmore declared, his voice firm yet respectful, "shall establish mutual passage, shared resources, and a future grounded in cooperation rather than conflict. It is a step toward unity, one that demands courage from us all." A murmur rippled through the assembled townsfolk, some nodding with cautious approval, while others exchanged uncertain glances. The weight of generations pressed upon the gathering, and beneath the glow of the lanterns, the promise of peace felt both fragile and profound. Chief Nantan Luda inclined his head thoughtfully. "The Apache people honor the earth and all who walk upon it," he said. "If this accord is forged in truth, we shall uphold it with dignity. But peace must be rooted in respect, not merely written upon paper." His words resonated through the stillness, echoing like the steady beat of a distant drum. Ayanna stood quietly beside Ethan, her sightless eyes turned toward the night sky, her fingers gently clasping the turquoise pendant that pulsed with warmth against her skin. She listened not only to the voices around her, but to the subtle currents of hesitation that drifted through the crowd like a shadow at the edge of firelight. "Something troubles you," Ethan whispered. Ayanna nodded slowly. "The wind carries uncertainty," she replied softly. "Not from those at this table, but from hearts burdened by fear." As if summoned by her words, a rancher stepped forward from the edge of the gathering, his weathered face marked by years beneath the relentless sun. Removing his hat, he spoke with careful restraint. "Governor Whitmore, Chief Nantan Luda, we have worked this land for generations. How can we be certain that trust will not be broken?" The question lingered in the air, heavy with honest concern. Silence followed, stretching beneath the lantern glow as all eyes turned toward the council. Chief Nantan Luda rose with measured grace. "Trust is not given freely," he said. "It is cultivated, like a field beneath the desert sun. It grows only when tended with patience and honor." His calm voice carried neither accusation nor pride, only quiet truth. Ayanna stepped forward, guided by the whisper of the wind. The soft chime of her pendant caught the stillness as she spoke. "The future stands before you like an open trail," she said gently. "Fear will lead you in circles, but understanding will carry you forward. The wind has shown me a dawn where children of every people walk beneath the same sky, unafraid." Her words drifted through the night like a prayer, settling upon the hearts of those who listened. The rancher bowed his head. Slowly, his doubts softened by her gentle certainty. One by one, the tension that had gripped the gathering began to loosen, replaced by a fragile but growing sense of hope. Governor Whitmore looked upon Ayanna with quiet reverence. "Miss Redbird," he said, "your voice brings clarity where uncertainty once stood." The lantern flames flickered in the evening breeze as Chief Nantan Luda extended his hand across the table. Whitmore accepted it without hesitation, their gesture illuminated by the soft glow of firelight and the endless canopy of stars above. Ethan felt a steady warmth settle within his chest, as certain as the rising sun. And as the wind whispered across the desert night, carrying with it the promise of a shared tomorrow, Silver Creek bore witness to a moment when courage overcame doubt, and the prophecy moved one step closer to its fulfillment. The night deepened over Silver Creek, and beneath a sky scattered with countless stars, the lanterns surrounding the council table cast a steady glow that shimmered like fireflies against the darkness. The desert air had cooled, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain, and the wind moved gently through the town as though whispering blessings upon the fragile accord taking shape. Governor Henry Whitmore stood beside Chief Nantan Luda, their handshake still lingering in the minds of all who had witnessed it, a quiet symbol of unity forged beneath the heavens. The parchment lay open upon the table, its ink gleaming softly in the lantern light, awaiting the signatures that would bind words to history. Ethan Caldwell remained close to Ayanna Redbird, his presence steady and protective, his gray eyes reflecting both awe and determination. Around them, the townsfolk watched in respectful silence, their earlier skepticism replaced by a cautious reverence for the moment unfolding before them. Ayanna stood with her face lifted toward the night sky, her sightless eyes serene as her fingers rested upon the turquoise pendant that warmed gently against her skin. She listened not only to the voices of those gathered, but to the subtle tremor carried upon the wind, a quiet reminder that destiny often arrives on silent footsteps. "The hour has come," she murmured softly. Ethan leaned closer. "What do you hear?" She drew a slow breath, her voice calm as the desert horizon. "A choice," she replied. "One that will echo across generations. The dawn that follows will remember what is decided here tonight." Governor Whitmore dipped his pen into an inkwell and addressed the assembly with solemn clarity. "Let it be known that on this night, under the authority of the Arizona Territory and in mutual respect with the Apache Nation, we affirm our commitment to peace, cooperation, and shared prosperity." Chief Nantan Luda nodded, his dignified presence illuminated by the flickering lanterns. "May this accord honor the earth beneath our feet and the spirits of those who came before us," he said. "Let it guide our children toward a future free from fear." With deliberate care, Whitmore placed his signature upon the parchment, the soft scratch of pen upon paper resonating through the stillness like the toll of a distant bell. Chief Nantan Luda followed, his steady hand sealing the promise with quiet resolve. A hush fell over Silver Creek, deeper than any silence the town had ever known. The treaty was complete. Yet as the ink dried, a sudden breeze swept across the square, lifting the edges of the parchment and stirring the lantern flames. Ayanna's expression grew still, her head tilting slightly as she listened to the whisper carried on the wind. "Do not fear," she said gently, her voice rising just above the soft rustle of the night. "The storm I foresaw was never one of steel or fire. It was born of doubt, of pride, of hearts divided by misunderstanding. Tonight, that storm has passed." The words settled upon the gathering like a benediction. The rancher who had spoken earlier stepped forward, his weathered face softened by humility. Removing his hat, he bowed his head. "Miss Redbird," he said quietly, "I doubted what I did not understand. But tonight, you have shown us a better path." Ayanna inclined her head with quiet grace. "Understanding is the first step toward peace," she replied. One by one, the townsfolk followed his example, their gestures of respect offered not out of obligation, but from genuine reverence. Ethan watched in silence, his heart filled with a quiet certainty that he had witnessed something greater than history itself. Governor Whitmore regarded Ayanna with profound admiration. "Your prophecy has guided us to this moment," he said. "The West will remember your voice." Ayanna smiled gently, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the lanterns. "The wind belongs to no one," she answered. "It speaks for all who are willing to listen." As the night breeze swept across Silver Creek, the stars shimmered brighter above the endless plains, and the promise of a new dawn settled upon the land. In that sacred stillness, where trust had triumphed over fear and unity had replaced division, the future of the West quietly turned its page, guided not by force, but by compassion, wisdom, and the courage to believe in peace. The first light of dawn crept gently across Silver Creek, painting the horizon in hues of gold and pale rose as the desert stirred from its quiet slumber. A cool breeze drifted through the town, carrying the scent of sage and fresh earth, whispering over the rooftops and along the wooden boardwalk where lanterns still flickered in the fading darkness. The long council table remained in the square, the signed treaty resting upon its surface, illuminated by the soft glow of morning like a promise preserved by the light of a new day. Townsfolk gathered slowly, drawn by the quiet gravity of what had transpired during the night. Their footsteps were hushed, their voices subdued, as if they feared disturbing the fragile peace that had settled upon Silver Creek. Governor Henry Whitmore stood near the parchment, his expression reflective as he gazed toward the awakening horizon, while Chief Nantan Luda watched the rising sun with solemn pride, the gentle wind stirring the silver threads woven into his hair. Ethan Caldwell stood beside Ayanna Redbird, his posture relaxed yet reverent, his steady gaze fixed upon her as she lifted her face toward the warmth of the dawn. The sunlight touched her gently, illuminating the turquoise pendant resting against her chest, its surface glimmering like a fragment of the sky. "The dawn has arrived," Ethan said softly. Ayanna smiled faintly. "It always does," she replied. "But today, it carries a promise fulfilled." The distant toll of the church bell echoed across the plains, its clear notes rising into the morning air, and with each chime the town seemed to awaken to a future reborn. Ayanna listened to the sound, her serene expression reflecting a quiet certainty. "The wind is at peace," she murmured. "The storm has passed." Governor Whitmore approached, removing his hat as a gesture of respect. "Miss Redbird," he said, his voice warm with admiration, "your words guided us through uncertainty. This treaty will shape generations yet to come. Silver Creek will be remembered as the place where peace found its voice." Ayanna inclined her head gently. "Peace belongs to those who choose it," she replied. "I merely listened to what the earth was already whispering." Chief Nantan Luda stepped forward, his presence dignified and calm. From within the folds of his garment, he produced a small woven sash of turquoise and crimson, its intricate patterns shimmering in the morning light. "Among my people," he said, "such a gift is given to one who walks in harmony with truth. Accept it, Ayanna Redbird, as a symbol of gratitude and honor." With reverence, he placed the sash in her hands. Ayanna traced the delicate threads with her fingertips, her expression filled with quiet wonder. "I am humbled," she said softly. "May it remind us all that understanding binds hearts stronger than fear." The assembled townsfolk watched in respectful silence, their earlier doubts replaced by admiration. The rancher who had once questioned the treaty stepped forward once more, his hat held respectfully over his heart. "Miss Redbird," he said, his voice steady with sincerity, "we laughed when we did not understand. Today, we thank you for showing us the way." Ayanna's smile was gentle, illuminated by the golden light of dawn. "The path was always before you," she replied. "You only needed the courage to walk it." Ethan felt a quiet warmth settle within him, as enduring as the desert sun rising above the distant hills. "You have changed more than this town," he said. Softly, "You have changed the West." Ayanna lifted her face toward the whispering breeze, her sightless eyes serene. "No," she answered. "The West has changed itself. I simply listened when it was ready to speak." As the sun climbed higher, its radiant light spilled across Silver Creek, illuminating the treaty, the council, and the faces of those who had chosen peace. The wind carried its gentle song across the open plains, weaving hope into the fabric of a new beginning. And in that sacred stillness, beneath the endless American sky, the prophecy found its fulfillment not in thunder or triumph, but in quiet understanding, proving that the greatest victories are won not with force, but with wisdom, compassion, and the courage to believe in a better tomorrow. The morning sun climbed higher over Silver Creek, spilling radiant light across the quiet town as the promise of a new era settled gently upon the land. The golden glow illuminated the long wooden table in the square, where the treaty still rested like a sacred testament to courage and understanding. A soft breeze drifted through the streets, carrying the scent of sagebrush and warm earth, stirring the canvas awnings and whispering through the hitching rails as if the desert itself were offering its blessing. Townsfolk gathered in respectful silence, their expressions no longer shadowed by doubt, but softened by humility and quiet admiration. Where laughter had once echoed, gratitude now lingered, carried gently on the wind. Ayanna Redbird stood near the center of the square, her serene figure bathed in sunlight, the woven sash of turquoise and crimson draped across her shoulders. The intricate threads shimmered with every movement, reflecting the harmony she had helped bring into being. Her fingers rested lightly upon her pendant, its cool surface warm against her skin, a silent reminder of her grandmother's wisdom and the voices of the past that guided her steps. Beside her stood Ethan Caldwell, his hat held respectfully at his side, his steady gaze filled with admiration. "The town feels different," he said softly, "as if the very air has changed." Ayana smiled gently, lifting her face toward the whispering breeze. "Peace leaves its own fragrance," she replied. "It settles upon the earth like morning light, unseen yet unmistakable." The distant toll of the church bell rang clear and true, its echoes drifting across the plains and mingling with the quiet murmur of the gathering crowd. Governor Henry Whitmore approached with measured steps, his expression warm with gratitude. "Miss Redbird," he said, removing his hat in reverence, "news of this treaty will travel far beyond Silver Creek. Your words have guided not only this town, but the future of the entire territory. Generations yet unborn will benefit from what has been achieved here." Ayana inclined her head modestly. "I merely listened," she replied. "The wind carried the truth. It was your courage that gave it life." Chief Nantan Luda stepped forward beside the governor, his dignified presence radiating quiet respect. "Among my people," he said, his voice deep and steady, "those who bring harmony between nations are remembered in stories that endure as long as the mountains. Your name will be spoken with honor, Ayana Redbird." A hush fell over the square, broken only by the soft rustle of the wind. The rancher who had once doubted her approached slowly, his weathered face softened by humility. Removing his hat, he bowed his head. "Miss Redbird," he said, his voice steady but sincere, "we laughed when we did not understand. Today we thank you. Silver Creek stands because you showed us the way." Ayana's smile was gentle, touched with compassion. "Understanding begins when hearts are willing to listen," she replied. "The path was always yours to choose." The rancher nodded, his eyes bright with newfound respect, and the surrounding townsfolk echoed his gratitude with quiet murmurs of agreement. Ethan watched the scene unfold, a sense of quiet pride settling within him. "You have given this land a future," he said softly. Ayana turned toward him, her expression serene. "The future was always there," she answered. "It only required faith to be seen." As the sun rose higher, its brilliance stretched across the open plains, illuminating the distant hills in shades of amber and gold. Ayana lifted her face to the warmth, her sightless eyes reflecting a tranquil certainty. The wind brushed gently against her cheeks, carrying the distant sounds of children laughing and wagons creaking along the road, symbols of a life unburdened by fear. "What do you hear now?" Ethan asked quietly. She listened for a moment, her smile deepening. "Hope," she whispered. "The wind carries hope." The breeze swept softly through Silver Creek, stirring the dust into shimmering patterns that danced like memories beneath the endless American sky. In that sacred stillness, where doubt had yielded to understanding and unity had replaced division, the prophecy found its enduring echo. And though the blind girl could not see the sunrise, she felt its warmth upon her face, knowing that the West had been forever changed not by force, but by compassion, wisdom, and the courage to believe in peace. The sun drifted slowly toward the western horizon, casting long ribbons of amber and crimson across the vast plains beyond Silver Creek as the day drew to a peaceful close. The town rested beneath the endless American sky, its wooden buildings glowing warmly in the fading light, while a gentle breeze carried the scent of sage and distant rain through the quiet streets. The treaty lay secured within the governor's leather case, its ink dried, its promise sealed not only by signatures but by the courage of those who had chosen understanding over fear. Life resumed with a new rhythm as wagons rolled steadily along the dusty road. Children laughed beneath the shade of cottonwood trees, and merchants greeted Apache visitors with respectful nods instead of wary glances. Where suspicion had once taken root, trust now began to bloom like desert flowers after a long-awaited rain. Ayana Redbird stood at the edge of Silver Creek, her face lifted toward the warmth of the setting sun, the woven sash of turquoise and crimson resting gently upon her shoulders. The breeze stirred her dark hair, whispering across her cheeks as though the land itself spoke in gratitude. Beside her stood Ethan Caldwell, his hat tilted against the golden light, his steady presence as constant as the horizon stretching before them. "The town will remember you," he said quietly, "and so will the West." Ayana's serene smile deepened, touched by quiet humility. "It will remember peace," she replied softly. That is all that matters. The wind brushed against the turquoise pendant at her throat, its smooth surface warmed by the fading sunlight, and for a moment she closed her eyes, listening to the gentle chorus of the world around her. The distant creak of wagon wheels, the soft rustle of prairie grass, the quiet murmur of voices carried across the open land all blended into a single harmony. What do you hear now? Ethan asked gently. Ayanna tilted her head slightly, her expression tranquil. A future unfolding, she whispered. Children walking freely beneath the same sky. Traders crossing open trails without fear. Nations speaking with respect instead of suspicion. The wind carries their footsteps already. Ethan gazed toward the horizon, his heart stirred by the certainty in her voice. And what of you, he asked. Where will your path lead? Ayanna's fingers brushed the woven sash, her touch light and reverent. Wherever the wind calls, she answered. My grandmother taught me that destiny is not a place, but a journey. I will follow its song. The church bell tolled softly behind them, its echo drifting across the valley like a blessing, and Governor Henry Whitmore approached with Chief Nantan Luda at his side. Both men removed their hats in silent respect. Miss Redbird, Whitmore said warmly, history will remember this day, and it will remember the voice that guided it. Chief Nantan Luda inclined his head. Among my people, he added, those who bring harmony between nations are called keepers of the wind. Your name will be spoken with honor for generations. Ayanna bowed gently, her voice humble and serene. Then may the wind remind them always that peace begins with a single act of understanding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky blossomed into hues of violet and gold, and the first evening star shimmered into view. A hush fell over Silver Creek, not of uncertainty, but of reverence for what had been achieved. The rancher who had once doubted her stood among the townsfolk, his hat pressed against his chest, his eyes filled with quiet gratitude. No laughter remained, only respect. Ethan placed his hat upon his head, his voice soft with admiration. You changed the West without raising a hand. Ayanna smiled gently, the breeze lifting her hair like a whispered benediction. No, she replied. The West changed when its people chose to listen. The wind sighed across the open plains, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow, and as twilight settled over the land, Silver Creek stood as a testament to courage, compassion, and the enduring power of truth. In that sacred stillness, beneath the endless American sky, the blind girl who had once been mocked listened to the whisper of destiny and knew that her prophecy had not merely foretold the future, but had helped shape it, proving that the greatest victories are won not with force, but with wisdom, dignity, and the quiet strength of a compassionate heart.